Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about status codes. So what status codes are? As I said to you, uh, computers understand numbers, but we as people were more custom with names and things like this, aliases. So basically, status codes is like some numbers that represent some meaning with, with the communication between a server and the client. And here we have the prefix. So all the status codes and basically numbers which are 3 digits. So all the status codes which are from 200 between 300 represent something like all the successful status codes, all the good ones, the ones you want. Now all the status code that you have between 300 and 400, so 301, 302 and so on, are redirects. Now you won't care very much about this because this is basically some redirects that the browser reader is doing for you or the server is doing for you and so on. But the ones you care about as a backend developer and also as a front-end developer is these ones. So all the status codes which have the prefix 4 usually are because of a client error. So something bad with the request. Something is wrong with the request which you are sending to the server. Now, on the other hand, all the status codes which begin with the 5 are problems on the server. Either the server is down, or the server has thrown an error, or the server hasn't accurately done error handling. So here it's the most common status codes which you will encounter as a developer. If we talk about 200, 200 is the most common one when it's an OK. Now if you pay close attention to all our requests, we have this 200 status code by default because we have successfully have received a resource. Now we also have the 201, which basically means created. This usually you will send to the front end when you create a resource. So in our context, maybe it's a good idea to put on the post mapping, and this is what we're going to do. Now, when we are talking about client error, these are the most common one. So 400 means bad request. So means that something is wrong with the request, with the way you are sending to the backend, or either the backend hasn't particularly processed that in a very good way, and it's something wrong with your request. Next is 404, and it's the most famous one, you know, error 404 not found. And this basically means that the resource on that particular endpoint, on that particular path, is not found. For example, when you visit a page and it doesn't exist, you have the 404 error because the resource is not there. It's trying to do a get and it returns nothing. Now, 401, on the other hand, is unauthorized. What unauthorized means? Means that you can't access that particular endpoint. You don't have the specific rights to do so. For example, if you imagine like an admin page, you are not the admin. You can't go there. Now, on the other hand, 403, it's forbidden. So basically, that particular endpoint requires a login, requires a authentication, and you are not logged in. Let's just imagine you go to Facebook and you are not logged in. This is forbidden. You need to log in. Now 409 is now the most common one, but we will use it. It's a conflict, some conflict in a request. Now I can tell you an example of a conflict. We already saw this when we developed the put mapping on our endpoint. You want to edit a resource that is different from your request body, and you can put like a conflict there. Hey, you are trying to edit the resource with ID number 2, but here you just put the request body with ID number 1. Now this is all from the client. So browser, Postman, another server which calls your server, and so on. Now server error means there's something wrong with your server. The most common one is 500, and it's usually internal server error, and it's a very generic one. It's a very generic one. It doesn't tell you much, but it tells you that something wrong with the server. Either the server hasn't accurately configured exception handling, or it's something wrong with it. Now 503 is something when the server froze, when the service is unavailable. The server is down. Now I will go to Postman, and if you pay close attention to our endpoints, you see here I have the status 200 and OK. Now by default, this is being added also by Spring when we return a successful response. Now, let me go to get one people, and if I type here this, naturally this ID doesn't exist, but you can see, okay, so I need to restart my application. Now, you see, I don't have that particular resource, but I still have the 200 status code. That's because in our way we have coded, we haven't properly added the status code, you know, to accurately tell the front end, hey, the resource is not there. Now, let me go here to get one people. So if you pay close attention, this get mapping, where it is, my eyes, okay, here. So this is an integer. Now what happens if I put here a string and type here? So this string, it will try to convert this string into an ID and it will throw an error. And if you see here, right now is 400 bad requests because there is something wrong with the way I'm requesting. So this is on the client side, you know. Now, let me just show you other errors in action. So let me go to my PowerPoint. So 200, 400, 404. The resource is not found. So let me just type this one and another mapping and another mapping. Now, this hasn't been configured in our application. So what I will have a 404 because the resource is not there. Now, this is also being done by Spring. In a normal way where you configured, this won't be the case. Now, let me go to my application, and here in this get peoples, let me just throw an error. So throw new exception, hello, like this. And let me just refresh this. I need to put this in the method signature. So we are going to mimic like something is wrong with our endpoint. Maybe some processing is wrong. Okay, I need to do that again. Okay, it's being thrown by default. So let me just do this. Let's just mimic a real case scenario. So I'm going to go here to person, add a new person, and here I'm going to put person get name to uppercase. So like this. So I'm going to restart this. So basically what this method does, it transforms my get name to uppercase, but it doesn't do nothing because I don't store this in a variable. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to save on people, and on the name, I'm going to put null. So now here it will take the name and it will call to uppercase on a null value. So it will throw a null pointer exception. And you can see I have a internal server error. And this is not something wrong with my request. It's something wrong with the way the server is doing the processing. Because if we go here, we have a null pointer exception here. And honestly, I think this is the most common error you will encounter as a backend developer. Null pointer exception if you don't do the valid checking very good. And you see here that we haven't properly handled this, and by default it has thrown this very generic error. Now, for example, if I stop this application and send it again, I have this call which basically the server doesn't find, and you see I have no status code, and you see here also all the status code in my application. So basically status code is a way to communicate between the server and the client. Now moving forward, in the next video we will properly configure our application to have accurate status code description based on what behaviors we want.